This is what you'll see as far as when we talk about Airtable and the grants. And so some of it is pretty, standard. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time. I don't think we need to spend a whole lot of time. But I want you to know that this is really how I teach in my class. And so please ask questions. Don't leave all of your questions. There is no question too embarrassing or whatever. So as it's fresh in your mind, if a question comes up, please stop us. Like this is, if I was a classroom, I'd like move my chairs, I want to get close to you and things like that, right? So please stop us and just ask the questions that you might have about anything that's on the application. This is a work in progress. It's a work in progress for us to even get to this point today. So just know that there are some kinks, and every time we go through it, we find more kinks. And so you even asking a question may help us discover a few more things that we thought were, sort of understandable that may not be understandable to everybody out in the community. And my heart is really in the community, and so I want to make sure that people can understand our application in the community. So you have your name. If you have a name for your project or you haven't quite thought up of a name for a project, we're going to ask you in the application to give us a name for your project. So here in this line here we have getting access to Lake Whitney. Okay, so we put some things into this application just to sort of make sure that we can move on. Name of the organization, Whitneyville Cultural Commons, where we are now. And then this is to help you think about, like, if you don't have a mission and vision for the work that you do, or if you're a part of an organization, we like for you to put in a mission of your organization, and maybe around the project that you're applying for, put in the goals of your organization, or maybe a goal for the project that you're specifically going to be talking about. So Robert, and I love him so, is putting some things into this box. And many of these boxes, what you'll see is that there is a word limit, right? And so the word limit was put there specifically so that you could be concise and clear, okay? So mission would be to preserve and enhance places of communal and historic value by providing public spaces, tools, and knowledge as shared resources to supporting thriving communities, social, cultural, and economically. That must be the mission for Whitneyville Cultural Commons, right? We are a small community group that has come together, so this would be like a goal. We are a small community group that has come together to enhance our neighborhood and move it towards sustainability. So WCC is our 501c3 fiscal sponsor, and we'll come back to that, what those words mean, what those numbers mean. Basically, it means that the Whitneyville Cultural Commons is a nonprofit, okay? And that is the tax status that the United States gives it, 501c3. Organization website, you would put in a website if you have a website. If you don't have a website, because maybe you're a grassroots organization, I met a woman right there, right, in the pink. She's got that color on that I love, right? And she's doing some work in hunger, right? And I know I have some other groups, like I don't know if anybody from Mothers for Justice is here today, but Mothers for Justice, all right? Small grassroots community, you may not have that tax status yet, right? Or you may not have a website kind of thing. So you would put in a website with your website here. Who's the leader of the organization? So your executive director or a leader, right? So most groups have a leader, the person that most people go to. You would put that name in. If you have an email, you would put the organization's email. And most of the kind of communication that we do at the grassroots front is through email, and then we would send you, we do some mailings, but the quickest way is for us to email you if we have a question. So email is important. And if you don't have an organization email, then who your leader's email is would be appropriate. Now, here it says the number of board members of your organization. So maybe you don't have a board, right? Maybe you're not at that level. You would put the number of volunteers, the number of people that work to do the work that you do, right? organization telephone number. So if we couldn't contact you by email, then how could we leave a message? Somewhere where we could leave a message through telephone. And then the next thing we'd like to know is last year's budget. So maybe you're an organization and you don't have a budget, you've never done a budget, and you don't know anything about a budget, right? What we also want to know is how much money did you spend last year? Did you spend $100, $500, $50? Some organizations know well what this means. But what we want to know is, doing the work that you do, how much money last year did it actually take you to do the money? It's not the money that you wish you had. It's just we want to ideal. This helps us measure how big an organization or tells us something about the work that you do. And it also tells us something about the needs that you have, right? Now here, the average number of hours per week currently worked by paid staff members. So maybe you don't have any paid staff members. Maybe it's all volunteer. Maybe it's just you and 2 other people doing the work, right? Kind of thing. So you wouldn't put anything into that box. But if your organization does have paid members, we want to know. If you have active core volunteers, we want to know how many volunteers you have. So it may be also that some of the work that you do, you have volunteers, people come together and you get a specific project done, but then people wax and wane, right, because of life or whatever. So steady, you might have a solid core of 10 members. I used to be the head of a health ministry, and my church had a 501c3. And I can tell you that I had 5 solid core volunteers that we did the bulk of the work, but when we needed to do an event, we might get 20 people that came together, right, to just get this event done, right, kind of thing, right? But then they would go off, and we had 5 real solid core volunteers, kind of thing. What year did your organization start? Your organization's fiscal year. So many people don't understand, but the first thing is what we call a calendar year. January through December, right? We just started a new year, right? So that would be a calendar year. And so if you work off of a calendar year, you would check that box. And then July through June 30th is what a different calendar year, more so a fiscal or money financial sort of year for some organizations. And if your organization works on that, we would want you to check that off. That makes a difference with how we give out our money and when you need it, right, kind of thing, and when it appears on your books. Email and contact for this application. So maybe there's a head person, but maybe there's just you and your couple of volunteers, kind of thing. And so who is the person that will be responsible for the project that you want this particular funding for? That phone number, and then the category of grant that you are applying for. So our small grants, as Rafa mentioned, are from $3,000 to $5,000. That is what we call our small category. And then the next category is what we call a large grant or major grant, and that's from $3,000 to $10,000. What is the amount that you need? So maybe the amount that you need is $2,500. That would be, when we look at it, that would be in the small grant category. And I know there's always a lot of questions, so let me just stop for a minute. Let's just take a pause. So I know when I'm writing a grant, and it comes to putting down the amount of money that I need, right? I was trained to say, always ask for more than you need, right? Just ask for a little bit more, because sometimes there's unintended or unexpected things that come up, right? So don't ask for exorbitant amount, like double, but ask for a little bit more than you need, kind of thing, right? And then there's a question that usually comes up when people are writing grants. What kind of questions come up when you're writing grants when we get to that? How much do you need? How much do you need to be asking for?
I'm going to ask for it all.
Oh, okay, all right.
All of it.
All right, so if we go up to 10,000, you're going to ask for 10,000.
I'm going to ask for 15.
Okay. So I love it, right? I love it, and we wish we had it to give you. But you just need to know that in some places, if you ask for amount and that's not they wouldn't even look at the rest of your application because they might say, right, we can't fund it, right? And so then you wouldn't even get read. So, but I want to stay here with you because this is important, I think. You want to ask for, you're saying you want to ask for the top tier kind of thing.
Right, because
right?
I'm starting a women's shelter.
Okay.
So I need it all.
You need it all, right. Okay, all right. So sometimes we don't have enough money to give you, to supply for all your needs. But if you had to think about something that you do, there are pieces to what you do in order to have a shelter running. Could $10,000 do a piece of that? And maybe there's two other things you need, but we just don't have the money for that. But if you had a good solid $10,000, and I know about starting women's shelters a little bit, that may buy beds for every room that you want to supply for that shelter and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you could just do that piece and write about that piece and why you need it, kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
You understand? And maybe there's two other pieces you still need, but you can make sure that you get that piece. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Anybody? Right? Thank you for speaking up like that. Yes.
I'm guessing
Laura.
you get into the details, but could you just speak to if there are things that are not permissible in the budget? Will you get to that?
Right. So, in our, and Rafa, you can help too. So we don't, with some of our grants, depending on what category and what you're looking for, we know that we will help some groups. You need to know, because this is a little bit different from some other organizations. We will even help with like startups, right? Like an organization that's starting up and they just need like capital for resources and things like that. You'll see that in some of the writings of our paper, where a lot of other organizations won't do that. Or advocacy work, right? Because there's a fine line between advocacy and what's that word? Lobbying. Yes. Advocacy and lobbying, right? But advocacy is real work, right? Like community organizing and advocacy, right? And a lot of people don't fund those things, but we do.
Okay.
Can you think offhand, anybody, grant people what we wouldn't fund?
What about purchasing property?
Oh, real estate, no, we wouldn't do that.
But
Yeah.
staff time is permissible.
Yes, personnel, absolutely. Yeah, good questions. All right. Anything else burning for anybody before we move on? Okay. Type of organization, so if you have your 501c3's nonprofit status versus if you're a community-based grassroots organization. And so I've already said I have a particular bias. I'll put it out there for grassroots organizations, but we like the other larger organizations too. So once I say that, I know I have to put my bias in check when I'm looking at grants and things like that. If you selected, now this question goes to something that we've already saw that we have a problem with that we'll fix. If you selected community-based grassroots, you need to fill out the next 5 questions. And they're really just basic questions. So if you're a community-based grassroots organization and you're not a 501c3, we don't give money to individuals, right? So you would need to go, so I would need to go to somebody like Robert, who Whitneyville is a 501c3, and say, Robert, I want to write a grant, and can they send a check to you in order for you to give the check to me, or let me do the work that I need to do? And Robert would say yes, because that's the kind of person Robert is, right? But you also need to know that Robert may say, but because I have to pay my tax accountant and people and stuff like that, I'm going to charge you a small fee if I do that for you, kind of thing. And that's fairly acceptable, kind of thing, all right? So what we're asking is, you'll need these next 5 questions to put in the information about what 501c3 you are partnering with in order for them to accept your money, because we just can't give it to you. right? You know what happens, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like I got a bank account that
Right.
will pay for that
Right.
check. Yes, so,
Marion?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yep,
Can
yeah,
you
no.
talk about what's a reasonable fee for a fiduciary agent to be expecting from, because I think some people get,
yeah,
they just haven't done it before, they don't know.
yeah. Robert, can you?
A percentage of the grant
Yeah.
or?
I'm gonna let Robert take that one because he does it.
So the Windigo Cultural Commons asks for between 5 and 15%, depending upon the size and the amount of work it is. With small grants like this and with small grassroots organizations, we'd be looking for either a flat fee or 5%. We want to keep it as low as possible, but we'd also be asking you to condense all of the work that we're going to be required to do into as few steps as possible and to take as much of it onto yourself as possible. So essentially, at the end, we're just writing one check to you to cover the cost of everything that you did. So say it was to deal with like trying to open up the Lake Whitney and get a trail in there, and you're talking to RWA and you're convening meetings, we might ask you to pay for it out of pocket, and then we'll reimburse all expenses when you bring us all of the paperwork at the end. And so these are sort of the ways in which nonprofits will try and cut down on their work so that they can give more of the money to you. And with this size of grant, you really never want to have a fiscal sponsor that's taking 10% or more. You want to keep it as low as possible simply because it's community money and you really want to support the community.
So if you hear what Robert's saying, so I hear something else when he says that. You want to be able to negotiate a flat fee, right? Because that would probably be best for really small organizations, right? And depending, right, if it's a first-time relationship, right, you want to negotiate for a flat fee, but then know that if you stay in a relationship, right, that things may work out, well, or as you work towards wherever your organization or whatever your thing wants to go. So, I hear flat fee. Question in the back.
But yes, this goes back one or two questions.
Yeah.
As far as examples. So if one's applying for the grant, yet what they're trying to achieve is a detailed step-by-step process, as most things are. But let's say it's reaching out to other nonprofits to see if they're willing to collaborate. Basically, like the operating budget of that research to build something greater.
So like it's an organization, what I hear is and correct me if I'm wrong, organization like in the planning stages of that, kind of getting your feet off the ground, making those partnerships and relationships and looking for where the money is.
Definitely making
maybe?
those partnerships and relationships.
Okay.
Maybe not just getting off the ground, because depending on the goal or the scope, you'll be reaching out to different people.
Right.
But see who's interested in, for the operational budget, to see who's interested in a project that organization has developed. So, the legwork in a sense.
Okay.
You're saying that's fundable.
I'm asking in this one.
Oh.
Don't think we
Research and
can
development.
fund the pre-work. I think that's what so like the stuff before the application, like all the preparation and reaching out and seeing if the project is even possible.
Yeah,
That kind of stuff.
in a sense.
I don't think we typically fund that work. We just don't have the budget to be able to do that. So we want as much money going towards
The actual
project.
doing, the actual
as
project.
possible.
Encourage
Yeah.
But we do encourage partnerships, so, but we don't fund that legwork kind of thing, if I'm hearing it correctly. Okay, all right, good question though, I like that. Any other? Oh, yeah?
Whatever award you get, is it one lump sum or do you have it operating throughout whatever year you choose, calendar or fiscal? Do you give the money out in one chunk or do you do half and then when the project's done, do the other half?
That's a good question. So we usually give out our checks in chunks, right? So what she wants to know is if like lottery, right? Lump sum, right? Or or pieces. And so we usually, once we say we're going to fund you, we will send you that check. There's usually some other kind of, contracts and things that have to be signed. But usually because we're a small organization too, we're all volunteers doing the work. We don't want to be saddled down with having to give out multiple checks. So usually Rockland writes a check once we say that you're funded and everything that we need from you comes in we usually write a check to you, period.
So I'll just add to that and say, yeah, so first, once we've let you know that your project will be funded, we'll draft a contract, and then once we both sign it, we'll usually send the check for the full amount, and then we'll ask for 2 reports, one an interim report 6 months in to kind of let us know where the project is at the time, and then a final report at the end of the year when the project is completed. And all of our grants come with the stipulation that if there's unused funds from the grant, if you're under budget, good job. We ask that you return the money so we can give out more grants in the current projects.
But let's just say, there are organizations that have come to us at the end and they have a little bit of money left over kind of thing. And it's the same project, but they want to continue on, or they realize that although they didn't say this in the grant, that there's a piece that maybe this money could cover, and if it's okay for them to use. And we've met as a grant committee and as a board and said yes or no kind of thing. Sometimes it's right in line with your work, because it should really be about helping the organizations, right, that we're funding kind of thing. But sometimes they'll ask for stuff that it looks like it's in a different direction than what they originally wrote about, and we might say no to that, right, to send us back that money kind of thing. So, and at least in my experience being on the board, those are some of the. But yes, we've said yes to many people when it seems like it's in line with the work that they're continuing to do. One of the projects that we funded in the past that I've overseen and I'm still in contact with is Solar Youth. Solar Youth is a youth organization project, and a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, we've got $300, $500 left over, and we want to continue to." Can we use that, right? And we've said yes to them to be able, so that they don't have to send us stuff back. Okay. How is your organization connected to the affected community for this application? So, when I read that and went back over it, and this has been a couple of times now, I think that there's some stuff here that we need to. So, what do we mean by affected community for this application? So maybe you want to do your project in a certain neighborhood. Maybe it's not all over Hampden or all over New Haven, but it's in a particular neighborhood. So the community that you want to work in or you're working in, we would want you to tell us what community you're working in. Is it the white community? Is it New Hawkville? Is it, so how is your organization connected to that? So we do our work. You would tell us, we do our work in New Hawkville, or we do our work in, I don't know really if Hampden has sections, but we do our work in, a particular section of Hampden, okay? Whitneyville, yes. Yes. All right. What's the project's location? So that there is some overlap synergy between project location. So maybe you're located in Whitneyville, but your project is really going to be in a different place, right? So your project is going to be in a neighborhood of New Haven or something like that, because maybe you partner with somebody that really sees the need to do this work in a different place other than where your organization is located at. Does that make sense to people? Okay. All right. Okay. Edgewood Park at West Rock Interest. I love Robert. Okay. Who do you want to reach with your project? We call this question demographics, right? So it's about age. It's about, you might see questions about, sometimes on various grants about ethnicity and things like that. But we want to know sort of what are the age categories, what are some of the problems. Although we don't have everything listed here, but this is our foray into collecting some demographics in a different way. And then the next question is just another way that you can tell us. So, for example, percentages of those considered minority, or maybe you want to tell us that this particular group is bearing a burden, like those people that live close to, that end of IKEA, that end of, Long Wharf, and that neighborhood that you have to go under the highway, right? Like I go there and I'm like, that are, bearing the burden of like air pollution or something like that. And there's something specific that you want to communicate to us about this group or what we call target population, but this group or community that you really want to work with or you're working with to help around whatever opportunity or challenge. Okay. Everyone within a mile radius around Lake Whitney. Okay. It's a diverse community ranging from a lower income neighborhood on the southwest of the Lake Whitney. Okay. To a very wealthy neighborhood, so it ranges from low income to, so it has a diverse income, socioeconomic status, okay? In your own words, what conditions in your target audience's environment do you want to address with this problem? So you see here is what we talked about, 50-word limit. So imagine you were in that elevator and you had to give a speech to somebody to tell them about what you wanted to do and why it was important and what you wanted to address with your project. And you were going from the first floor to maybe the fourth floor or fifth floor of a medium speed elevator, right? Okay? So 50-word limit. How would you start up a conversation and said, oh, I'm going to pick up my check for, this project, and how would you explain that project? We want you to really take some time and be clear and concise about what it is that you're doing, what you think you're addressing, and then the next question says, what do you plan to do? You'd be surprised some of the things we have to read from a grant perspective, right? And maybe the last two sentences of half a page really tells us, right, what you plan to do. So, provide an outline of your project expected to be completed in 1 year. So, our grant cycle goes for 1 year. We give you about a year to finish your project. And we understand, that's why we asked the previous question about what your year cycle is, what you plan to do. So, when we say outline, if this was my classroom, I say start with a bullet, all right? Start with a bullet. The easiest way to do this is start with a bullet about what you plan to do and what your steps are. And then add sentences to those bullets, right? Does that make sense? To help you sort of, if you thought about what you plan to do and it took 10 steps, right? You could do 10 bullets. And then what those 10 sentences or 2 sentences for each bullet would look like, kind of thing, right? And I'm just, it doesn't have to be, but I'm just sort of giving you an idea of what we're thinking about. So Robert, with his wonderful mind, it says, get local residents to sign a petition to Regional Water Authority showing the need to remove the fence. Yeah, I knew what it was, right? Solicit Regional Water Authority with that petition. So the first step is get people to sign up to do a petition, right? So there's actually a step before that one. Do a petition. Get people to sign the petition. Then bring the petition before the Regional Water Authority in whatever time frame that they look at those types of things, right? Understanding that calendar and things like that. And then you have to wait, right, and then fund the removing fence and allowing people access. So maybe the Regional Water Authority comes back to you because of your petition and says, yes, we'll allow the fence to be removed, but we don't have the money to remove the fence. Right? Right? And so, so then that's going to add another step, right? Then you say, do I have enough, can I get community partners to move, to work with me in order to help us move the fence? And what are those things around it? Do we have to get permits to move the fence, right? Kind of thing. There might be a couple of other steps, right, in there that.
So would you, about your
God bless you.
collaborators, like people who are collaborating project, like, for instance, like we do in the New Haven Parks, would you mention New Haven Parks and Recreation collaboration?
Right, because your partners, in order to work with you, may have some steps to do. Like, I'm thinking about at the university, a lot of times we do work with community organizations, or we send our students to do internships, and there's like MOUs that have to be signed. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, you know, and things like that, that in order to work with you, they have to do something special too, even though they love the partnership kind of thing. So yes, you have to think about all of those things, right? Absolutely. What specific tactics and strategies will you use, right? So some of that we already talked about when we're thinking about those bullets, right? But what's a tactic? I'm sorry, tell me your name. Lisa, okay. So Lisa, give me an example of like a specific thing that you have to do in order to work with the parks, or to the parks to work with you, or one of your partners to work with you.
We have to get permits in order to have our.
Get permits, right? So you need somebody that would be in your list of to-dos or bullets or whatever, but you know that that's gonna come, and there might be like a time frame, right? Because if it's like anything, I used to work in the city, right? It's a process, right? So like I say, it's a process, right? So you have to allow that in your plan, or what we call your timeline, right? Kind of thing. Yes. So specific tactics and strategies you would use would be, right, know the things about, there are some rules around petitions too, or whatever it is that you use. Protest might be another. The news, the media, social media might be also specific tactics that people use. And permits, like Lisa said, might be one of those other, making sure the permits are signed and you get the proper whatever it is that you need to do the work that you're going to do. Does that make sense to people? Am I making sense? Questions for me? Okay, yes? All right. What are your objectives? So objectives here we're using as results, right? So if I talked, if Robert with this example that we're using, what are your objectives for doing this project? So really it's what results do you want to accomplish by the end of this project in 1 year? So one of the results, and we're talking about this fence around this lake, right, in this petition, we want the fence down. That's the ultimate result, right? We want the fence down, and then the other ultimate might be to have provide people access, right? You take down the fence so that people can have better access to this lake, right? Or right? Okay. So get 1,000 people might be the result. We got 1,000 people, or we got 1,200 people to sign the petition, right? You went above and beyond. Get at least 10 organizations to sign the petition. And there is some thinking, specific thinking around when you talk about your results, or what we also call outcomes, right? Objectives, results, outcomes kind of thing. You have like your ultimate, out of the park kind of goal, but sometimes we say go for, instead of 10 organizations would be your out of the park, maybe you might say 5, and then if you get 10, you've done really good kind of thing, right? Get RWA to agree to open a property, so there's a couple of things that you can put here as your results. So results don't have to be one thing, right? Because the project, right, is multidimensional. So if you think about all the sort of positive outcomes, successes, right, results that can happen with your project, you might list a couple of them. Because in your report, we also want you to tell you, and then we didn't realize, sometimes there's things that happen that you don't even foresee in your application that are really good results or outcomes, right? Okay. And then this is why I'm standing here today, this next question. Why I'm standing here today. Right, Rose? This is why I'm standing here today, because of this question. It says, how will you measure the results of your project? And It says some examples of measurement tools are available on our website, and there's a 100-word limit. So, in some organizations, they've got this down pat. I will also say that things like the organization that I worked with this past year, Solar Youth, they do a great job with giving you different ways that they measure their results and outcomes. So I'll put this out to the crowd. What's the quickest way that you can come up with how you explain your measuring results? I know you want to talk to me. Go ahead. Tell me your name.
A survey?
A survey, right? But right, a survey might be one of the easiest ways that you measure your results, right? You use a survey. We're going to do that today, actually. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a survey to fill out. So survey might be one. What are the other ones? In the back.
Maybe like attendance of engagement.
Right, so the number of people that came to your event, right? So maybe with you put in a grant that you want 100 people to come out to this neighborhood, whatever, right? And then you say you counted at least 150, right? Kind of thing. So those numbers, that's the quickest, easiest, and then you were going to say that.
Would be, did you accomplish the goal that you originally put in?
Right, did you accomplish the goal? So I'm here because I get tired of seeing just those numbers and things like that, right? That's the quickest, easiest way. But if you tell me 100 people came, you might have counted somebody else passing by that's really nosy kind of thing, right? So, you understand what I mean? So I want to know, how can you show me the impact of those 100 people? And I'm interested in seeing you do it in other ways. Because what I know is that in community grassroots people, you don't always have the people that are bean counters, right? Everybody bean count, yeah, right? Okay. So maybe you take a photo with a lot of people, or in this room right now, if I was to take a photo, I want to stand back here because I can get a photo of most of the people. And if you do like I do, when I see photos like that, I say, okay, how many empty chairs is in that room? Okay, right? There's ways of taking photos that people makes it look. But maybe you do a really good photo to not only tell us that number, but then you do a photo of the people. And in that photo, I not only see a lot of involved people that care maybe about that based upon what I see in the picture, but I might also be able to see the diversity that you're able to attract in that picture, right? I might also be able to see read a whole lot of other things into that one picture that you give me, right? So on our website, we have a picture at the end where they're sitting down, they're doing some school is doing some education with kids and things like that, right? That picture to me tells 1,000 words, much more than you telling me 10 people came or 100 people came, right? Kind of thing. So I want to encourage you to tell your story, to tell your success and outcomes and results in other ways. And that is why I'm here today, okay? Because you telling me 10 people or you passed out so many brochures or whatever, or got so many volunteers, does not really tell me the story, right, about your project and the impact of your project.
So say,
Okay,
mine
there we
is
go.
a women's shelter.
Okay.
So I can go into the New Haven Green
Uh-huh.
and take a picture of the homelessness, right?
Mhm.
And then I could show maybe the women, there's not so much homelessness no more because of my program. Could that be something like that you're saying?
It could be, but I'm gonna stay with you here, okay? Because now you're I've got you now, right? So what I would say is there's this concept called photo voice, right? So it's not only you taking the pictures, but maybe you'll capture what they say to you, and you'll write it in a little. So you'll take say you start your shelter, and your first 10 people that come, you really make an impact. And you're able to show, because we give you a year, that when that person first came, right, they're going to tell you something, right, that convinces you that they need to be in your project or at your shelter, right? You may capture that in a couple sentences with a photo, right? And then before your project is finished, you may be able to go back to them and say, tell me how you've changed now that you've been here. That means something, right? Like you taking that person, taking a photo of them. Maybe I do this program on Saturdays with at-risk youth. And when I see the at-risk youth, middle school and high school kids come in and they're dressed in black and they're not looking at you and they're doing all that stuff. And then at the end, they're doing presentations and they're dressed differently, and that tells a lot more, right? And then give a blurb about what they say now that they've gone 9 months or 8 months or a year with you. Tells me a lot more about the impact of why not only I want to fund you again, but maybe some other people, and then you can use that to go get more money, and that's more impactful, right? You not only talk about your results and measure your results in different ways other than numbers, right? We call it qualitative, right? Where you get qualitative pieces. But does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Okay. And that is why I'm here. That is why I'm here today. And you know, like, I'll talk to you also because not only am I here, but my students need to do projects, right? They need to do these type of projects, right? And so, like, maybe you'll come back at the end of this and say, hey, Dr. Evans, you got a student that could do some of that work? My nephew, Kashan, he's around the corner, right? I was like, you're coming, you're going to help, you're going to do this, right? You're going to hear, right? So you can know, right? Kind of thing. So does that make sense how you can tell your story, capture your results, measure your outcomes outside of numbers, right? Or outside of those sort of typical ways, right? That people, and yes.
How you're trained, like I'm trained, your measurable goals always have to be numbers, and they don't really have to be numbers. It can be another way.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, we might want to come back. It's up to you guys, but we might want to come back and have some smaller roundtable discussions about how you do this. And this is some of the stuff that my students worked on, right? To be able to tell your story. I'm also a Graustein, fellow, and so storytelling, and not only at Graustein, but now at other funders, their storytelling is really, right? You want to capture the hearts, right?
Concat.
So in Bridgeport, I know there's a particular part of Bridgeport and Black Rock, or it's still Bridgeport, that there are millionaires that live there, right? And I'm sure there's a place in New Haven too like that. But I know particularly where these people live, right? So it's one thing to go up to them and say, oh, I helped 25 women for a year, and now they're doing much better and they're able to find jobs, whatever. But it was another thing when you can say, I helped 25 women, this is what they look like, right? Because we make assumptions based on when we first see people, right? I helped 25 women, this is what they look like, this is the diversity of them, and this is what they said before and after. And that would make me want to give you $50,000 to do all three parts of that project versus you just telling me about the numbers. Right? Okay. All right. Okay. So, how will this project help you reach the mission of your organization? Now, so in the beginning, we asked you to tell us about the mission and your vision and your goals kind of thing. And then this is, go back to this. Are you really sort of telling us that this project, right, fits into what you're saying you're doing? Or is it totally out of the scope? You're just asking for this money and it's totally out of the scope. So this makes you go back and say, I said that this is what my organization or this is what my group is about. And is this project really fitting in with, right? And so how will this project help you reach the mission of your organization? It's Lake Whitney has been a communal asset of the neighborhood of Whitneyville for 400 years. Removing, what does the fence say to people? Keep out. Right? That's the story that I want to know. Right? That's the story. That's the real story. We want inclusion, right? We don't want the fence there. We want access, right? Who are the key project leaders for this project? I know you told us that sort of in the beginning, but maybe things will change for pieces of it. But who are the key project leaders for this project? What organizations are you collaborating with, and what is their role? So we encourage you to have partners. We won't penalize you island, and this kind of work around an environment is done best with partners. And so it says something about a group or organization that you have partners, people that you work with, that you don't think that you need to do your work in isolation. You had your hand up.
I just have a technical question.
Yeah.
So, like in the paper version of this, it doesn't say that there's a word limit for the key project leaders section. Does that star mean that there is a word limit, and do you know?
The star means that it's a necessary field. The word limit will be stated very carefully down here when there is a word limit.
So there's not a word limit.
Right.
for
For
that
the,
section?
yeah.
Right.
So-
Okay. Okay. What steps? Yep. Okay. And so yeah, we just talked about that. So if you so think about this. Maybe there is 5 people that are working on this project in your organization, but maybe there's really 3 key people, because the next thing we ask you is what each role each of those people play. So you may not want to write about what role of all 5 people, but pick the 3 key ones, so it makes you think a little
Yeah,
bit.
I just cut and pasted our bios,
Yeah.
2 people,
Okay.
and I was like, oh, doesn't have a limit. Am I gonna do I have to spend more time editing this before I put it into the?
Yeah. No.
Actually, on the bios, we have a thing at the end where we ask to attach
Right. You can attach it
information
as
about
a
your
list.
organization and board members and things.
Yeah.
Would
So
you
that
rather
would
us
be-
not then do that here?
Right.
Yes,
Just want-
if
you
it's
just
gonna
want
be
names
attached at the
there?
end, names and roles, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that would-
So if you're going to attach it at the end, okay, but the role is really, right, accountability, right, within the organization and outside of our organization. So yes, so then the next question we ask you, what are those 3 people's roles, right? So Robert's putting in some names of people there, but then what their roles are. So maybe Robert will head the petition, because he's that kind of, person. And, but maybe, the 3rd person in your key role group will be the people the person that's in charge of making sure those permits get done, right? And those are I always say, I am the thinker up here. Like, I like to think up here. I cannot for the life of me do details and nitty gritty. I need people to help me do that, right? Like, I forget stuff. I'm not a nitty gritty person. So that person will be the person that reminds you that a permit has to be done, or the police have to be contacted, or whatever, right? And they play key roles, kind of thing. What steps have you taken to include affected community stakeholders in your decision making? And so this is new to us. We're moving there, and I'm glad we're moving there. But it says something about a group doing work when you go into a community and you don't involve the people that live there, right? And so we want you to try to make an effort to involve the community. So if you're cleaning up a certain piece of, let's say, Mill Pond in New Haven, or the Lake Whitney and things like that, we want you that's good work to do, but we want you to figure out a way to include the people that live there, right? To include the people that live in that community. And maybe at first it'll be 1 or 2 people, right? Because they don't really understand, right? And, but we want you to start thinking about how you include the people and be more inclusive in the groups, or to make sure that we capture that we understand how you're doing your work, kind of thing. So how is leadership shared? And this also goes back to this equity piece that many people have heard about, and they don't know. Equity is really about how we distribute resources, right? And so, and we can do it, but this makes organizations now think about, are we just going in and saying, oh, we're just here to do this work, and you just stay where you are, and we're going to do this, and we've got money. We're not sharing the work or the money or the mission with you, right? Like many organizations have done, but we want to move away from that. And so this actually asks you to think about, who would you need to contact in the community in order to make sure, give them an opportunity to do some of this work with you. And it helps build your organizations and your mission, I think. Ask council people, door-to-door outreach, having a, food is a wonderful thing. Having, a community food event kind of thing. And I say that, and to me, it seems like it's common knowledge, but common knowledge is not always common. Okay. Describe any specific challenges and opportunities your group faces in accessing resources for your work. So we also want to know, what are the challenges for you, right? So you might say to me, for your shelter project, this money will only cover the first piece, which is making sure I have beds and rooms and people are not sleeping on the floor. But there are 2 other pieces that I still need that I'm looking for funding for. Because maybe I'm sitting there and I'll say, oh, I just met somebody that's really interested in this cause. And maybe I can reach out to you and say, hey, you should contact for your other 2 pieces this person, right? Because now you've told me what you need. And we can be a help. Maybe not, we can't give you another $10,000, but maybe we can put you in contact with someone that can help you continue your work, right? Does that make sense? Definitely. All right. So this can range from skills and capacity to, maybe some people say, well, I really think that I want to become a nonprofit, right? And maybe what the next step I think for my organization to do is to become a nonprofit, right? And then that may tell us, hey, if a lot of people say that, maybe the next workshop we give will be about how to become a nonprofit kind of thing, right? RWA, okay. So Robert's right, and RWA requires that all projects that are created outside of their organization be completely funded, are really expensive. So we require a large amount of money. All right. And so this was what Rafa was talking about before. This is where you can attach a file. There are 5 things that we are asking you to attach, especially since this is our first time doing Airtable as we move towards a totally electronic grant submission. So this year we're asking you to attach this written piece, the RFA that we've gone through. But we're also asking you to attach these 5 things, right? So next thing we're going to talk about, and I'll let Ralph start off. Budget for the project.